thank you for joining me today, you guys. It's a pleasure to be joined by a performer our audience may not always encounter regularly, but with a project that's near and dear to my heart, especially since this time around you're featuring a little bit of cello, which is my instrument myself, in your upcoming performance. But Carrie Rodriguez, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's my honor. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having us.
And before we talk about this project that you've been doing since 2017, Laboratorio, tell me a little bit about your musical background and your upbringing, as I know it's very important to this project too.
Sure. I grew up here in Austin, and I started playing the violin at age 5. Bill Dick, my lifelong teacher and dear friend, was offering Suzuki violin lessons at my public elementary school. And so I was very lucky to get to start at that young age. And I did study classical music up through my teens, but I was also dabbling in improvising and different types of fiddle music. So I was beginning to go down a classical route. I went to Oberlin Conservatory for a year and then switched gears, moved to Boston and went to the Berklee College of Music and found my groove on the violin. And over many years, I've sort of just, I just keep learning and growing. I mean, I started out as a, I guess, Americana type artist, playing kind of country-ish roots music with Chip Taylor. And that led me to writing my own songs, also sort of in that genre, which led me to start singing in Spanish a bit and then mixing everything together.
But you're from a musical family, though, too. Tell me about some of the influences or whether they were guiding you in different paths.
Sure. Well, yeah, my father was a singer-songwriter, folk singer-songwriter. So I did grow up with a fair amount of Townes Van Zandt being played in the house, things like that. And I did start playing gigs with him when I was in my early teens. So I always had this outlet outside of classical music that was leading me into different directions. And then his aunt, my great aunt, was an incredible singer and performer named Eva Garza. And she was always very much a family legend. My grandmother would talk about her. She passed away when she was very young. So I never met her, but my grandma would always tell me, oh, your great aunt Eva, she was in Mexican movies and she had gold records. And I don't know, growing up, I always thought she might be exaggerating a little bit because, grandmas love to brag about family. It's what they're supposed to do. So it wasn't until my early 20s that my grandma sent me a stack of CDs that she had digitized from her sister's old recordings. And she said, Carrie, you need to listen to this music. This is where you come from. And this is part of your family. So I'll never forget, I was living in New York at the time. I put on one of those discs and I heard my great aunt's voice, and I just had to sit down on the couch and start crying. I couldn't believe this was part of us and me somehow. And that's what led me down the road of learning more about Mexican music of her time, a lot of the composers that she was singing songs of, and ultimately singing more in Spanish myself.
Well, that's a lot of pressure too once you start really digging into that music and you start seeing how your voice fits into it. In my experience, there's like this line, there's this moment where you go from impersonating what is tradition, what is so deeply rooted, to actually feeling and expressing the music in a genuine way. Tell me a little bit about that transition as you, especially if you come from a classical background. Obviously, the technical is a very important part, but then when you start getting beyond the technical and really diving into the material. Yeah.
I mean, it's true. And maybe one thing that helped is that I'm not a trained singer. So I did have a lot of training in the violin, but I never learned anything about singing. So that was maybe something that I didn't think as hard about. And yes, when I was first singing in Spanish, I was self-conscious. I remember thinking, like, am I allowed to do this? I mean, I didn't grow up speaking Spanish, and as a lot of people who grew up in Texas know, I mean, just because, you are Latino does not mean that your family speaks Spanish. And for so many reasons, we won't go there. But yeah, so I had those kind of doubts, but I definitely was probably imitating what I heard at first, listening to my aunt's music and the music of her peers. But I think, yeah, I mean, one thing that helped me find my way with that music was writing my own songs, which often are in Spanglish.
Yeah.
So that's, a way of, feeling like they're really, I'm finding my own authentic voice.
Well, I'm excited about the material that you brought today to perform in our studio. Tell me about selecting this Cuco Sánchez piece then.
Sure, I love Cuco Sánchez. So he's one of the great composers from Mexico, and he wrote a lot of songs that were recorded during the Época de Oro, the golden era of Mexican music and film. In fact, the first song I ever heard that he wrote reminded me so much of like a Merle Haggard tune. It was a country song. The lyrics and the passion and the heart, they were just so similar. Maybe that's what drew me to him, being, a Texan and also loving country music. But this song we're doing, Si No Te Vas, I just adore the lyrics. They're so raw. If you don't leave, te voy a dar mi vida. I'm going to give you my life. And then she ends at the very end of the song. She says, but if you do leave in that moment, I will die. So así de claro. It's like, she lays it out there.
Wonderful. Diving into the music of Cuco Sánchez, Si No Te Vas. I think it is just perfect to the culture of the music, and adapting it in a new way and for new audiences. I want to talk about this project that you've done since 2017. It's called Laboratorio, right? Mm-hmm. And it happens 4 times a year at the Paramount Stateside Theater. So tell me a little bit about the concept behind Laboratorios.
Sure. Laboratorio is a musical celebration and exploration of Latinx culture. Yeah. And we started it actually at the Cactus Cafe when we first got going. And it was really, I wanted to connect more with the music community here. I wanted to learn more about Latin music. And I say that with air quotes because Latin music can mean so many different things, just like being Latino can be so many different things, right? It's vast, and that's what this project is all about, is exploring that, and whether it's through genre or through stories, just sharing that information with each other. So the musicians on stage are learning, and the people in the audience are learning, and we're always having fun.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about that, this audience-musician dynamic, because you do have a house band, but you bring in guest musicians as well.
We do. So we have an amazing all-star group of Austin-based musicians. And then we bring in special guests for every show, and every show usually kind of finds a theme. So like our last show was with a Tejano legend, Ruben Ramos, and a country singer, Rick Trevino. So it was a really Tejano-based show. Our upcoming show with Bion Tsang and Claudia Chapa is a classical show, which is so exciting. And we'll be playing music primarily by Mexican composers.
Is that a challenge? I guess I'll pose the question now, maybe to Bion, maybe you can take this. Is it a challenge to approach a music that you are not known for playing professionally?
Well, I'll tell you. So when Carrie approached me about this, of course, we've done things together before, so I jumped at the chance. But then as we were talking about repertoire, she really wanted me to do this piece that so you introduced it to me, and I didn't recognize the title, Granada by Lara. And then when I looked it up, I was like, oh my God, yeah, I know this. Because I grew up listening to, trying to imitate really great singers, and so when the 3 tenors became huge, right, I really followed them, and this was one of the songs that they would sing. And so I was like, I immediately recognized it, and I was like, oh geez, how am I going to pull this off on cello? And so I thought about it I almost said, I think we need to do something else.
So glad you didn't.
But then I just, I figured something out, and you're going to get to hear what I came up with. Yeah.
Do you trust all the musicians that you bring in with all the music?
Infinitely.
Yeah?
Oh, are you kidding? And I am really curious, Bion. How did you... did you actually write things down as you came up with this arrangement of the piece?
So what I did was I just listened to a number of different recordings, and I thought, okay, I can do that trumpet line, I can do that, I can do this. And so I had something mapped out in my mind, and then I had to get the music to figure out if I could actually then translate it onto the cello. So once I got the vocal score, then I just kind of circled, on the iPad. I circled, I'm going to play this, I'll play that, and then I went into Photoshop and I actually cut and paste and made a part that I could read. So I don't use music notation software, so
Right.
that's my way of doing it, is using Photoshop. But,
Very cool. I was so curious. Thank you for sharing that.
So this isn't necessarily a strictly Carrie Rodriguez project.
Oh, heck no. That's what it's all about. That's what I love. I mean, I just love getting to learn from these incredible musicians and humans. It's like we're on a playground.
Sandbox.
Yep, exactly.
Well, David, I want to ask you too. Obviously, I think more your background is more on the rock and roll or jazz side, or you seem to have ventured into a lot of different musical realms. How has your interaction been with the audience and a way of presenting this music authentically?
Well, one thing about the Laboratorio shows is that they're never over-rehearsed. We generally rehearse once the day before. And so when we're on stage, everyone's antenna is wide open. And your heart has to be wide open and your focus has to be on the moment. And I really feel like the audience gets a view of that. And it kind of reciprocates. Because generally it's like you can hear a pin drop the whole night. Everyone's just waiting for that next thing that's coming up, and so it feels very life-giving in that dynamic, and it feels like it's a very kind of like the entire room becomes an instrument of its own.
Yeah. Has this program been a challenge?
This one that we're about to do?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm working chronologically. I have yet to dig in. But I mean, so when we go into these shows, it's not like it's a completely new set of music. The band has a repertoire that we've established, but because there's new performers, it's a new take on it each time, and then we also do add new material that's site-specific to the performers, So it's always just very fresh and very exciting.
And I think that kind of plays into the culture of the music too, right? There's this element of relying on each other, relying on musicianship, relying on the authentic. Can you dive into that a little bit more?
It's true. Well, and what David was just saying, the reason why all of this works to just have the one rehearsal is because everyone on stage is, first of all, just a phenomenal musician and performer. And they all, I mean, the amount of experience combined on our stage, we're like 1,000 years old. But, our bass player is Roscoe Beck, who was the musical director for Leonard Cohen for 30 years. We have Peter Stopschinski on keys, who was in his own right a great composer and keyboardist and plays with all the Latin bands in town, right? Alex Marrero, who is a drummer, incredible drummer, and also a wonderful singer and the front man of Brownout, Latin funk band. So it's like we've got all of this on stage, and we do really trust each other. So we can pivot in an instant, and we can lean on each other when we need to, and we can also laugh together when something falls a little bit. And despite the fact we do have one rehearsal, but we share the music. I'm sharing the music at least a month out. Everybody is doing serious homework. Everyone makes their own charts. Our arranger is working very hard right now. Actually, we're having a meeting after this. And so they do come into that one big rehearsal very prepared and ready. And so I don't want you to be scared, Bion. Poor Bion's going, what did I get myself into?
Well, maybe one final thing. How would you like to, address our classical audience in what to expect of this music, what to expect of these performances, and maybe why they should be interested in something like this?
Sure. Well, I'd love to talk about Claudia Chapa, who's not with us right now,
Yes,
too. But
yes.
if anyone was there at the Cruzar la Cara de la Luna,
Oh, yeah.
they know what to expect.
That's
there,
cool
right?
too, because let's talk about that, because this is not the only thing that's happening. This only cross-platform between Latinx culture and classical music.
Exactly. Yeah. In fact, I mean, it's when I was watching that mariachi opera.
Yeah.
I think that I had Claudia in my radar, and I had seen some videos and was just so amazed by her singing. But when I saw her in that show and I saw that piece, I went, oh God, we have to do something together for Laboratorio. This is that blend of music and culture and storytelling in that genre just was so powerful, and everyone in the room felt it. And I think, yeah, and speaking to classical audiences in regards to Laboratorio and our upcoming show, I hope to achieve that. I mean, we're on stage exploring and we're honoring classical music. We're also honoring the music of so many great Mexican composers. There's such a wealth of music, and we're cross-pollinating and finding new ways to tell that story. So yeah, I think that there will be things to enjoy, no matter what kind of music you normally listen to.
Wonderful. Tell us when this is. It's on the 28th?
Yes, April 28th at Paramount State Theater, so right next door to the Paramount. And yes, our featured guests are Claudia Chapa and Bion Tsang. We'll have our band. We'll have video projections as well. And we hope to see you there, April 28th.
And again, there are 4 of these concerts every year. Where can we find out when and where they're all happening?
Sure. Well, you can always go to my website. There's a carrierodriguez.com. There's a Laboratorio page there. And you can also go to austintheater.org to learn about, scheduling and get tickets for the shows.
Oh, great. Thank you. Carrie, David, Bion, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.